What's up guys, my name is Natalie and welcome to my Nook of Novels. Today I'm going to be doing my June wrap-up, so I'm going to be telling you guys my spoiler-free thoughts on all of the books that I read in June. And before I get into that, I just want to mention that I'm so happy that you can see the unicorn from here because this is the first video that I filmed from this angle since I've moved the things over there. And so I wasn't sure if you'd be able to actually see that in the background or not, but you can, and I'm so excited about it. So yeah, let's just get straight into the things that I read in June. So technically, the first book that I finished in June was The Sacrifice by Charlie Higson, but I talked about this in my May wrap-up already because I read most of it in May and I was really close to the end. And for my TBR game that I play, which I will have linked down below if you do not know what I'm talking about, but I just counted that I read this in May and didn't give myself a punishment for June because I was so close to the end. I will also have my May wrap-up linked down below as well if you guys want to go check that out and see me talk about this book as well as the other things that I read throughout May. But I'm not going to talk about this here because like I said, I've already talked about it. So moving on, the second thing that I read in May was The Maze Runner by James Dashner, and this was actually a reread because I read it in 2020 and I really enjoyed it, and I've been wanting to continue on with the series since then, but I just haven't had a chance yet. I finally reread it so that I could continue on with the series. So if you don't know the concept of this book, all of these boys are trapped inside of this maze and they don't know how to get out of it or anything like that, and they have no memory of anything except for their names and kind of bits and pieces of the outside world, but no solid memories of their own past, if that makes sense. And they're basically just trying to figure out if there is a way to escape from the maze. It definitely gives very much escape roomy vibes, and it's just like a giant puzzle that they're trying to solve. There were some things that I forgot about that are definitely very important to the story, and it was just a fun time being back with some of these characters and seeing how they try and figure out what is going on. I love the sarcasm and the banter between the characters. I'm actually currently reading the sequel to this and I'm really enjoying that so far as well, so I'm definitely happy that I chose to reread this and continue with the series. And I gave this one 4.5 stars. The next thing that I read was These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong, which I gave 4.25 stars. So this is a Romeo and Juliet retelling that takes place in Shanghai in 1926. And so it follows the children of two opposing gang leaders. The two gangs are trying to rule over the city, but there's also foreigners that are trying to come in and take over Shanghai. And there is a plague going around that makes people rip out their own throats. I would say this is definitely a very plot-focused book. It's not as romance-based as you would think it would be for a Romeo and Juliet retelling, but it definitely really works. I very much enjoyed the amount of romance that this had in it because it definitely made sense. And the enemies to lovers kind of aspect of it made sense as well, and just the way that it played out in terms of the plot and the characterization of the characters, it just worked very well together. So if you saw my similar books video, I forgot what I called it, books with similar vibes I think, but I'll have that link down below as well if you want to check that out. But I talked about this in that video being similar to Scavenge the Stars because that was a Count of Monte Cristo retelling, and it also had some enemies to lovers and there was stuff with the play going around, and just everything about this screamed that book to me, which is not a bad thing at all. I enjoyed that book quite a bit, and I definitely think that had I read it physically, I would have enjoyed it a little bit more, but this definitely screamed that book to me. Just all of those vibes made this a very enjoyable book, and I think I read it at a very good time too because I was very in the mood for this when I picked it up, and it was so enjoyable, and I'm so glad that I read it. The next thing that I read was Schooled by Gordon Corman, which I gave 3.5 stars. I really enjoy reading a lot of Gordon Corman's books. He writes a lot of middle grade, and this is a middle grade book as well. It follows a kid who's named Cap Anderson, short for Capricorn. He was raised on a hippie farm and does not have a lot of experience with the normal outside world. His grandmother falls out of a tree and cannot take care of him, so he has to go to a public school and interact with normal people, and there's just all of the stuff that he has never experienced before, and it's kind of funny seeing the kind of culture shock that he experiences. There's a lot of chaotic things that go on in this book. There's this part where he's literally driving a school bus and people are like, what are you doing? That probably made no sense without the context of the story, but it's such a fun time. Like I said, it's so chaotic, but in a good way. And there were definitely multiple parts that made me audibly laugh because it was just so ridiculous, and these characters are so funny. So next up is The Hellbound by Yeon Sang-ho and Choi Gyu-seok. So in this world, there are these demon-esque creatures that basically come and try to drag people to hell. I'll just read you the back because I feel like that's an easier way to explain this. So, one day you will receive a notice. The message will only consist of your name, the fact that you are going to hell, and the time you have left to live. When the time counts down to 0, mysterious creatures manifest to condemn you to hell. Amid social chaos and increasing hysteria, the public struggles to make sense of the deadly phenomenon, and those marked for death must find a way to survive this inexplicable terror. I really wish I could think of what they call the messages that tell people that they're going to hell, but it's interesting seeing the way that the different characters interpret these messages, and basically just society arguing with itself and people trying to decide where these messages come from and if they're real or not. There's definitely a religious aspect to this where there's a lot of people who are like, oh, it's God trying to warn people against sin and tell them to stop being sinners. And then there's other people, they're like police that are investigating it, being like, it was a homicide, that's why that person is all burnt up, and all these videos of it are probably just edited, and those are not actually demonic creatures that have just come up out of nowhere to burn this person alive, essentially. And it's just interesting seeing the way that different people interpret it and people trying to fight against it, I guess. But obviously, there's not much humans can do against demonic hell creatures. I definitely enjoyed this, and I'm excited to pick up the sequel. I think it comes out in the middle of July, but I don't remember for sure the specific date or anything, but I'm definitely excited for that. Also, I gave this 3.75 stars. The next thing that I read was They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera, and I definitely really enjoyed this one. There's this thing called Deathcast that calls people between the hours, I think it's 12 to 3 in the morning, and tells people that they're going to die that day. There's this app called The Last Friend or something like that, and you can basically find a last friend to spend your final day with. Rufus and Mateo are each other's last friends. They get together and decide to spend their final day together, and it's very interesting to see how the two of them react to the situation, because Rufus is very much like, it's my final day, I want to make memories, I want to go out and explore and just have a memorable last day. And Mateo is very much, I am going to stay inside my house where nothing can hurt me. I'm going to try to prevent this, but obviously there is no preventing it. He's going to die that day regardless. Nobody has ever not died when they've gotten a call from Deathcast, but he's like, I want to try. And then it's basically just him growing because of Rufus, and Rufus growing because of Mateo. There's it's a literal web that is written out at the end. I don't want to show you because it's kind of spoilery, but it shows how all of the characters are connected to each other, because literally all of them are connected in some way. So I was not quite expecting exactly what this was, because I thought that it would be more romance focused than it was, which I'm not mad about, because obviously you don't just fall in love with somebody completely in a single day. I also liked the use of perspective in this, because it mostly just flips back and forth between Rufus and Mateo, but it occasionally follows some other side characters, and the first chapter that you get from every character always starts with either so-and-so is not going to die today because they did not receive a call from Deathcast, or so-and-so is dying today because they received a call from Deathcast. It's cool to see the different perspectives of these people interacting together, because like I said, all of them affect each other in some way or another. There were multiple points where I was like, oh, if this thing happens, I'm going to be really disappointed, and it just very much seemed like it was going to go that way and be boring, but then something else happened and I was like, oh, okay, I see what you did there. I definitely like where it ended up going instead of what I thought. It's very hard to explain this because I can't spoil it for you guys, but I did like how things ended up going is the moral of the story. On to my issues now. Mateo as a character was just kind of frustrating to read at first, because obviously, like I said, he was just kind of scared of the whole world. He definitely broke out of his shell as the book progressed, and it was definitely enjoyable to see him grow as a person, but it was just at first I was like, Mateo, buddy, you're gonna die a sad and lonely death because you're just not going to do anything with your day. The other issue that I had, and the next book that I'm going to talk about, Autobiography, I had this issue there as well, even though I loved that book, and I did really enjoy this one too. But I find, especially in YA books, that this thing comes up a lot in the like almost sex scenes or whatever, they're like fade to black. You can't actually tell if certain things happen, because just the way that they write it, especially in this, I noticed just the way that he described things, I was like, oh, they're not actually doing anything, they're just kind of spending their last night together, just the wording and everything. But then I was reading the note stuff at the end, and it said that there was a fade to black sex scene, and I was like, that doesn't seem right. Like, that's not what I just read. I still honestly am not even really sure if he just changed it when he wrote the actual book from the notes, or if I just misinterpreted it. But whenever I was reading it, I definitely did not get those vibes from it. Yeah, that was really my only issue with it. I definitely enjoyed all of the characters. there's lightning outside my window. Yeah, I gave this one 4.5 stars. This next one is definitely my favorite read of the entire month, and that is Autobiography by Christina Lauren, which I gave 5 stars. I love this book with all of my heart. I actually annotated this in blue pen. I don't know if you can see any of my annotations. There were definitely a lot of times where I just started scribbling, like something would happen and I was like, I don't know what to say. So it's kind of like when you just hit all the random letters on the keyboard and hit send. That was me reading this book. I was just like panic scribbles because of the things that just happened. I don't even know where to begin. I'll synopsize it first. That's a good starting point. It follows Tanner, who lives in this Mormon town, and he is not Mormon. I don't think he's religious at all, but he is bisexual. Where he moved from, he was out as bisexual and everyone knew that about him. But since he moved to this Mormon town, he is back in the closet again. This other boy, Sebastian, is a year older than him, and he's taking this seminar class where you basically just write a book and turn it in at the end of the semester. Sebastian is very well known in this class because he actually got his book published, and so he comes in to help out this class and be the TA. Him and Tanner kind of kindle a relationship, but it's kind of an issue because Sebastian is Mormon. He is very much in the closet. This definitely gave Heartstopper vibes because of the one being out, the one being in the closet still, and just the cute little straight boy turns gay situation, and it was very, very cute. All of the romantic vibes were just chef's kiss. It was so heartbreaking to see his experience and Sebastian trying to be what his parents want from him but not being able to be that, and just his religion and his sexuality, having both of those. It was a very different read, I feel like, than anything that I've read before, but it was such an enjoyable read, and some of the things that happened just blew my mind. You'll see in my June reading vlog. I will have that linked in the description as well. I was filming while I was reading it, and there's a part where I just kind of stare at the book. I set it down and I have an existential crisis because of this book, but it was definitely so good, and I cannot express how much I loved it. But again, I had an issue or two with this. Just the way that they write some of the things was just very confusing, especially like I was saying about they both die at the end, where it's almost a sex scene, but it's not really, because it fades to black, but then they're talking about it after, and it almost seems like they did, but then the way he said it was like they didn't. It just didn't give the vibes that they did, because he had said something to his dad, and I was like, okay, so they definitely didn't, and then he was writing something out later, and I was like, oh, so they did? And I still am very confused. I still don't know if they did or not. And another confusing thing, I spent the first good 50 pages of this book thinking that him and his best friend were dating, because the way that was described was not very clear at all. Maybe it was and I'm just dumb, but just the way that he was talking about her just made me think that they were dating. I was like, this is such an unhealthy relationship. Neither of them are interested in each other. I was just like, why are they dating? This doesn't make any sense. And then at one point he was like, ooh, are you texting him? And I was like, wait, they're not actually dating, are they? And I guess they made out one time, and then he was like, oh no, we're just friends. But just the way that they describe it, that's not what I thought was going on. Once I realized that they weren't dating, I definitely liked his relationship with his best friend a lot more. I love the strength in the friendship as well as the romantic relationship that he has. Yeah, like I said, this was just a super heartwarming and also a really hard-hitting read, and it was so good. And the final book that I read in the month of June was The Fallen by Charlie Higson. If you have not seen any of my other videos where I talk about the Enemy series, it follows this group of kids who's trying to survive in this world where all of the adults have either died or turned into these creatures that are trying to eat the children because of this disease that has gone around. Goodness gracious. It is storming outside. I forgot where I was. The storm outside distracted me. I honestly don't know if I like this more than some of the other books in the series or less. I think the series is getting progressively better because there's new elements that are being introduced at this point, because there was a part where people were walking from one destination to another, and I was expecting it to go into that more than it was, because in the first few books of the series, it definitely goes into depth about the people traveling from place to place, because it's very dangerous to go out into the city because there's these adults everywhere that are going to try and attack them. But this one did not as much. There was so much other stuff that happened in this book that you really didn't need that, and you'd already seen their adventure thus far, and you didn't really need to watch them step by step walk from point A to point B. There's another element comment in this one. Not to give any spoilers, obviously, but if you've seen Toy Story and you know that little doll thing that has spider legs on it, I just kept picturing that. There's some new things that are introduced and they're terrifying, but also I kind of really love them, and that's all I'm gonna say about it because obviously, like I said, I don't want to spoil it. My phone just went off and scared me. I really, really like this, and I like where the series is going, and there's only 2 books left now, so I'm definitely excited to finish it up. I give this one 4 stars. Before I forget to mention, my Rainbow Readathon that I always forget about, the color for the month of June was blue, and I definitely read a couple books with blue on them. So both of these books, I don't really know if you would count this as like blue or purpley or not, but this one definitely has blue on it, so that prompt was checked off. So far I'm still winning that readathon, even though I always forget about it, but you know, it's fine. So those are all of the books that I read in the month of June. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, then please hit the like button and subscribe if you would like to, and hit the notification bell if you would like to see the other videos that I post on Tuesdays. Comment down below what you read in June. My Bookstagram and Goodreads will be linked in the description if you guys would like to check out either of those, as well as all of the other videos that I mentioned in this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!